very much. Minutes from the previous meeting on the 8th of July 2022, which is on pages 5 and 18 of our pack. Just can I see if there are any comments, or can I take the minutes as a true and accurate record? Margot?
A spelling mistake in my name, Chairman. I'm sorry I didn't bring it to your attention earlier.
Thank you very much. I think we found the error. Apart from that, we're happy to take them as an accurate record. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Now we move on. Actually, let me just sign them. Thank you, Caroline. Item 4. For some of our administrative purposes, Police and Crime Panel, we've got some proposed appointments of members on pages 19 and 24 of our pack. The report from the Democratic Services Officer to the panel sets out the proposed appointment of 2 Conservative local authority co-opted members, Councillor John Gledhill and Councillor Sarah Vaughan. Do members have any questions of the report? If so, Caroline will answer them. Any questions on the report? No. If the nominated members would like to come to the table and introduce themselves. Let them do it in either place. I think you were told the top table, weren't you? But by all means, come to any table, grab a microphone, and do just introduce yourself so that we know who you are. Sarah, would you like to go first once you're settled?
Good morning. I'm Sarah Vaughan. I'm a local councillor in Southampton for the Sholing ward, and I'm Shadow Cabinet Member for Stronger Communities and Crime Prevention. And I was on the panel last year for PCP. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. John?
Morning, I'm Councillor John Gledhill. I'm the Ward Councillor for Leon Solent West. I've been a councillor now for 5 months, and this is my first time in politics, so I should be new to the board.
Welcome, both of you. If I can point members to the recommendations on page 19, we as members are now asked to vote on the following recommendation: that the panel notes its membership for the 2022-23 municipal year as laid out in table 2 of this report, that Councillors John Gledhill and Councillor Sarah Vaughan are appointed to the Hampshire Police and Crime Panel as a local authority co-opted member representing the Conservative group, that subject to the appointment proposed above, the panel notes the panel membership is, at the current time, politically proportionate for the purpose of the balanced appointment objective as outlined within table 3. Can I just see if I have everybody's agreement to note that? Agreed. Thank you very much. Welcome Sarah and John to the panel. Then we are due to move to item 5, deputations and questions. We are awaiting the Commissioner. The Commissioner's got another appointment that we were informed of, and she may not be aware of how quickly we get through our initial administrative items. So what I suggest we do, if I have everybody's agreement, is defer item 5 until the Commissioner joins us. Do I have everybody's agreement to do that? Brilliant. So let's move to item 6, which is the Chairman's announcements. First of all, I would like to welcome Karen Lucioni, who is joining us as the appointed representative of the Isle of Wight Council since our last meeting. Welcome, Karen. Following notification from the Commissioner that Olivia Pinkney would be stepping down as the Chief Constable next year, the panel supporting officer has been working with the Commissioner's team to prepare the necessary arrangements for a confirmation hearing for the PCC's proposed candidate for Chief Constable. We look forward to receiving notification from the PCC of her proposed candidate, at which time a date for the confirmation hearing will be published on the panel's web pages. On behalf of the panel, and I think we can all wholeheartedly agree this, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Olivia for her dedication to the residents of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight and wish her well for the future and all the best.
Chair, can I
Please, Dave.
I want to echo your comments about Chief Constable, and I actually wonder if we as a panel can send some letter or written, if other members are happy, for the work that she has done for the Hampshire and the Isle of Wight as Chief Constable. Certainly from my contacts around, I think we've had an outstanding Chief Constable who has truly done a fantastic job for the community of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I see no reason why the panel, through you, Chair, could not recognise that. I'm sure there'll be other forums, but if you're happy with that, I would propose that.
Are all members of the panel happy that I work with Caroline to send that letter? Thank you very much. Item 7, we have had a working group meeting since the last panel meeting, and it falls on me just to give a brief update about our conversations and the work of the panel. So we have agreed a work programme for the working group. So there is, of course, that pre-work to be done by the working group to take stuff to the panel. And we focus through the police and crime plan, what those delivery of priorities are before the end of the current term, and we know it is a truncated term for this commissioner, along with a programme of thematic updates. This is reflected, you will see this articulated in the Police and Crime Panel work programme at item 12. As requested, we have had conversations with the Police and Crime Commissioner and her team to bring an update to this meeting on the priorities to deliver 600 more police officers, better outcomes for victims and tackling antisocial behaviour. I think people will have been aware that was articulated in the slide when we sort of saw what themes the Commissioner was working on and in which quarters, in which years. We also had a conversation, building on some of the conversations that we've had in the panel previously, about the Commissioner providing data to the panel to support some of the updates that we've seen when we have had updates on plan delivery, so that we can see the hard data that supports some of the statements that we have received. Brilliant. I can see Donna has just joined us, and in danger of leaping on Donna as soon as she joins. We've juggled our agenda items, if I may say, Commissioner, because we've been zooming ahead. I'd like to invite you, if I may, to the front table, and we'll come to the agenda items for your announcements.
One nice place, are we?
Yes.
Perfect.
In your own
Right,
time,
good
Donna.
morning,
Don't
panel.
rush. I know you've just joined us.
Thank you. Right, good morning, panel. Apologies for being a few moments late. I've been at a Trafalgar Day celebration on HMS Victory this morning. I'm joined today by Pete Jones from my office, Head of Governance, Oversight and Scrutiny, who many of you will have met through the subcommittee meetings. My Chief Exec, Jason Kenny, is currently away on holiday, so Pete is here to help me today with any questions that may come from you, and also to go through the update on the delivery of the Police and Crime Plan. So I'm going to keep my Commissioner's updates really short today, because obviously we've got the update on the annual report, Chair, and the update on the annual report will cover a lot of the things that you would normally expect me to go through with you. So the first thing to update the panel on, and some of these things I'm aware that you do know, but of course we have had the resignation of our Chief Constable Olivia Pinkney, which is a blow to me as a Commissioner that's 16, 17 months in, but I obviously very much support Olivia in her ongoing police career, and I think she will go on and do many wonderful things beyond Hampshire Constabulary as well. I am therefore in the process of recruiting a new Chief Constable, as you are aware. I have communicated that through Chair and to Caroline as well. And the interviews are on Thursday the 3rd and Friday the 4th of November. And I will keep you posted, and obviously be bringing back my preferred candidate recommendation to all of you in due course. Secondly, yesterday I'm really pleased that I was able to launch the new co-op navigator scheme that was done in conjunction with Portsmouth City Council and also with the co-op themselves, who have funded those navigators. It's a pilot we're running in Portsmouth City to tackle the growth in retail crimes, particularly abuse towards people that work in shops and supermarkets, and secondly, towards people shoplifting. So to really try and get under the skin of this. It will be a landmark pilot if successful, and we're very much going to be tackling this, aiming at tackling people's long-term reasons as to why they commit shoplifting offences, often because of Class A drug addictions and also alcoholism. I have kicked off the big Hampshire and Isle of Wight-wide Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Review, doing that as chair of the Hampshire Local Criminal Justice Board. So the Crown Prosecution Service, the Probation Service, prisons have all been carrying out their own EDI reviews, and as chair of the LCJB I'm pulling that together and also working with the force in terms of how they are delivering on the pledges made in the National Race Action Plan, and I will update in due course if you have questions.
Donna, sorry to interrupt you, and I know what you're like when you're afloat. I just wonder if I could ask you just to slow it down a bit, because I know panel members and the audience sometimes find it quite difficult to keep up, as even just writing stuff down. Is that all right?
In terms of the barrister strikes, so there have been barrister strikes that have been going on across the country that you'll be aware. That has had an effect here in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight on our Crown Courts particularly. That is a concern for me, and I'm sure for many of you, in terms of not only are we having more dangerous people out in our communities for longer than perhaps they need to be, but secondly, it's victims of crime that then obviously are losing confidence in the system, and in the worst cases are then pulling out and not supporting the process, which of course is horrendous. Moving on from that, the new Victims Bill has been launched, and that has been through the committee stage. As the national lead for victims, I have been able to influence and shape the pre-draft, gave evidence at the Justice Affairs Select Committee, and we are expecting the government's publication of the response to the new Victims Bill on the 30th of November, and again I'll bring back information to you, because this is going to be key for councils as well in terms of some of the Victims Code of Compliance and the way that your community safety partnerships and your housing and children's social care teams will be working as well. I've moved my office. You know, I previously gave you the update around the savings, and I have been able to move my office to Fareham on the 7th of October, so we're getting started on the money that I previously advised you of that I was saving. The modern day slavery exhibition continues with gusto around the county. I think it's just left Aldershot and Farnborough, but the details are on my website, so please do go and have a look at that if you haven't seen it, because again it is getting acclaim through the Home Office. Since I last spoke to you at panel, I have taken a decision very much in conjunction with the Chief Constable Olivia Pinkney to increase the South East area allowance for police officers from £1,100 to £1,800 in view of the cost of living crisis. And when you look at the pay rises that police officers have had over the last 7, 8, 9 years, it's been minimal, and they really did need that extra support. And forces around us who had a South East area allowance had increased theirs, so it was right and proper that we did that. Great news in terms of the Safer Streets Round 4. We were one of the most successful areas in the country to get a settlement as part of Safer Streets Round 4. And I really want to say a huge thank you to the councils that were really supportive in this. So Southampton City Council, an amazing amount of money, Councillor Renard will be aware of, £645,000. And I can tell you that is because Southampton City Council have worked so constructively with my office in putting together probably one of the strongest bids in the country to tackle some of the really systemic issues that are going on, particularly around the nighttime economy, which Councillor Renard and I have discussed and are working on together. Portsmouth, it's called the Solent bid. Portsmouth, Havant, Gosport, Fareham and the Isle of Wight. A successful grant from the Home Office in Safer Streets Round 4 of £733,000. And again, I'm very happy to give you further information in due course if you want me to do that. Last 3 points, Chief, and then I'll, Chair, and then I'll be bringing it to a close for you. Burglary and the 100% commitment that the Acting Chief Constable Ben Snuggs and I made, I think it was 3 weeks ago now, to commit to 100% of domestic dwelling house burglaries being attended. Many will say that this is just what we should be expecting. It should be, that's the way it should be. But because of the impacts on low officer numbers over recent years, that hasn't always been the case in many forces across the country. But there is now, because of Uplift, a commitment from the Acting Chief Constable Ben Snuggs that we will be going to 100% of dwelling house burglaries, which, as I say, at the very least the public should expect. I've run a joint campaign with Hampshire County Council over the summer called Is Your Child Safe? Big thanks to Hampshire colleagues for their work on this, and to Councillor Ros Chad, the Deputy Leader of the Council, but also Cabinet Member for Children's Social Care. It was actually her idea. She brought it to me and said, look, I think there's some work we could do. We then furthered that together, and it was a really successful campaign. Finally, 6 new unmarked police bikes. You may have seen this in the media that I have paid for, and they are now operational. 6 unmarked police bikes, 3 what we would call dirt bikes, for want of a better word, and 3 high-performance road bikes to really help tackle, particularly in Havant, in the Thicket, in Southampton again, where there have been issues with particularly teenage groups getting away from the police on electric scooters, electric bikes, on foot, through alleyways. These bikes are much more agile and mean that the police are able to apprehend people much quicker. We did host, in conjunction with the Home Office, on the 26th of September, we had the annual BEAM conference here in Hampshire. That was really, really successful. And we also hosted a contingent from Albania, 3 mayors and 2 government ministers, and the Home Office asked Hampshire to be part of the Albanian visit because of the great work that's being done through my office with the Youth Commission. And one of the things that the Albanian government and the Albanian, it was 2 towns and a city mayor that were here, were keen to learn was how we work with young people to try and prevent them from being criminalised and to divert them away from things much earlier. And I was very happy to support the Home Office in that visit. And we've now forged links with the Albanian mayor, and I'm hoping with the National Crime Agency to go and do a joint visit to Albania. I've got a meeting about that next week. And that, Chair, is my Commissioner's announcements.
Thank you very much, Donna. Now, I have said to the panel that it's not about asking you potentially lots of questions about the content, but if there are points of clarity, I'm happy to take some questions. I can see Dave's already there, waving at me. So, Dave, is it a question on clarifying a point
It's
that
only a
Donna's made?
timescale. I'm really pleased to hear about the EDI review, which is clearly very broad.
Yes.
And I'm interested in if there's any significant milestones when we can just get an opportunity to see how that's progressing, because I think that's an excellent piece of work, and I'd like to. There must be some interim report or whatever's coming out. It'll be quite useful, particularly as you cover across the range of public services. So that was just one observation, and whether it's appropriate or not, I don't know. I am the chair of a local parish council in a place called Chale, which to most people is the middle of nowhere, but actually it does a lot for young people through a group called Sway, which is in your report, and I'm not going to ask a question in the report, but I just wanted to acknowledge the funding. It will be very difficult for most people to appreciate just how beneficial to young people who live a deprived world, and it's quite a challenging area that you've actually contributed to there. So I just want to get the acknowledged thanks in for that, and I'm sure there are other members who could do the same thing, but certainly from my point of view, I know that's going to have a positive impact, so thank you.
You're very welcome, and through my office we do fund, a large number of organisations, charities and community interest companies. Some of them are jointly commissioned with the probation service, with health partners. I've got several things I'm now doing with the ICB, which, Chair, you are obviously on the board of the ICB, which is fantastic. Lots, too many to mention, but you're right, Sway, I'm aware, really great work, and anything we can do to help, please let me know. And on the EDI stuff, so yes, that review is something that I'm running through the Hampshire Criminal Justice Board, which has judges, probation, CPS, prisons, etc. In fact, I've got a meeting at Winchester Prison, I think in about 3 or 4 weeks' time. We had to move the date because of the Queen passing. But that's very much for me to take that work forward with them as well on the EDI review. But the CPS have done a fantastic piece of work. And I chaired the Criminal Justice Board yesterday and spoke directly to Suzanne Llewellyn, who is the Wessex director of the CPS, about us all sharing information together. But really, I suppose more for me, yes, I've got that sort of governance role over Criminal Justice Partners as the chair of the LCJB. But really, my main focus in that area is to ensure that Hampshire Constabulary is doing everything that it can to comply with the National Race Action Plan. And in actual fact, I did speak on Radio 4 about 5 weeks ago, with Abimbola Johnson, who is the barrister who wrote the National Race Action Plan, and she is coming to Hampshire in January to meet with the beam leads across the different organisations within Hampshire Constabulary. And if any colleagues want to come along and join, you're very welcome. So we'll be going through that in a lot more detail, but I'm happy to bring it back to a subsequent panel meeting, an update.
Thank you, Commissioner. Just looking to see if there are any other questions for points of clarification, and I can't see any. No, thank you very much. In that case, what we did do in your absence was defer item 5, which is deputations and questions. And in a moment, I will be asking the members of the public who've got deputations and questions to come to the podium. I just didn't know whether you wanted to stay there or whether you wanted to take a seat on the side whilst that was
Item
happening.
5?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously, understanding orders, it's really nothing I can do, so I'll vacate and come back.
So it's up to you. That's what I just thought I'd give you the brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Commissioner. We'll go back when we come back to the other items on our agenda. So I am pleased to welcome for deputations and questions previous panel member Mr. Bob Perkis, who has submitted 2 questions to today's meeting. Bob, if you'd like to join us and pose your questions. Welcome and good morning.
Thank you very much, Chair. I see not much has changed. I'd just like to take a couple of seconds, if I may, Chair, to just contextualise the question. Is that okay? I mean, I'm just looking at the figures and the stats, obviously, that the PCC is referred to, and I think it's just interesting to note, particularly as the role of the panel is to scrutinise, challenge and support, of course, the work of the PCC. But it's interesting to note that of the 3,022 officers that we currently have in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, only 9 are black and 22 are Asian, out of 3,022. And when we look at some of the actions of those particular officers, particularly in the area that's referred to in the question, stop and search, if we look over the past 3 months, we've had 3,339 stops in the last 3 months, and only 364 arrests out of that. But more importantly, I was born here in Winchester, and there's not that many black people in Winchester, but in Winchester, black people are 16.4 times more likely to be stopped than white people, 16.4. In Eastleigh, it's 12.6. I went to school in Eastleigh, and there weren't many black people in Eastleigh when I went to school. And in Portsmouth itself, 7.4. And one of the interesting points that I'm going to come to in the question that the PCC has raised is that of the 465 stops in Portsmouth, only 21 were noted for suspected bladed articles. Just contextualise some of the questions. So the 2 questions that I've submitted, and these have been submitted following, as you know, it's Black History Month. We had the police come to the launch of Black History Month and made lots of statements, a lot of young people involved, so there's a lot of community work going on, but it's how their impressions are gained as to overall, which is probably why you've only got 9 black people out of 3,000 odd. So would the panel please ask the PCC whether the recent interview on the 24th of August to GB News, given by the PCC, where she equates a rise in knife crimes to immigrants, has any factual basis or statistical analysis upon which to make these statements? And if she believes that the message contained, whether she believes it or not, between the increase in crime and refugees and asylum seekers sends a wrong message about attitudes within the Hants Constabulary. It is noticeable that she has garnered support from followers of Enoch Powell and Nigel Farage. If this is her belief, has she issued any policy instructions to Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police, and what has been the results in the number of knife crimes in the two counties? Question number 1. Question number 2, would the panel please ask the PCC whether, given the recent attitudes discovered at the Basingstoke pick, does not the possible interpretation allow officers to increase even more the justification to stop and search an even more disproportionate number of black people than they have already admitted? Those are the 2 questions that I would submit on behalf of many other people to the panel for you to scrutinise and challenge and support the PCC. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Bob. I do have a response. Did you want to stay there just in case you had a supplementary following the response?
That would be fine, yes, Chair.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bob. So, Bob, welcome back to the panel. Thank you for raising these questions to the panel. We approached the Commissioner in advance of the meeting as a matter of courtesy to invite her to make any comments on the questions raised, and the Commissioner has provided a statement which she has asked me to read out. The Police and Crime Commissioner welcomes questions from members of the public, and to ensure the meeting operates in accordance with standing orders, requests questions directed to her directly are sent either in writing or in email to her office, and not through the Police and Crime Panel. I think these questions form part of the wider agenda, both nationally and locally, relating to equality and diversity in policing, and I would propose that we bring forward the thematic update on equality and diversity from our work programme to the panel's next meeting in January. Through this, we would invite the Commissioner to provide an update to the panel on how she is supporting and promoting equality and diversity across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, with these questions encapsulated in the discussion. I wanted to ask whether I have the agreement of the panel to do that within our work programme. Yes, you all agreed? Our members are agreed. Bob, did you have a supplementary question following that response?
Not necessarily a supplementary question, but I think that current events elsewhere has shown that there is a correlation or a relationship between what is said at the top of any organisation and the direction that, in this particular case, the police take. And I would ask the panel to bear that in mind when they do their scrutiny.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. It's a pleasure to see you back here at the panel. You are welcome, of course, to remain and observe the rest of today's meeting, but it's good to see you. So, moving back to item 9, if I may, panel members, which is the Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report on pages 25 and 70. If the Commissioner would like to join us again. Yes, of course. No, don't rush. As I said, Donna, take your time, settle in, have a glass of water, whatever it is you need to do. I heard your cough.
Okay.
So let me just say, in front of us we have the Commissioner's draft annual report, and I know we do have a hard copy, but it is still in draft. I'd like to thank the Commissioner for sharing this draft with the panel for our comments, the format of which is commended by the panel for being well laid out and informative, providing a comprehensive update on activity over the past 18 months. Donna, please do talk to the report and then we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. And I should just start by saying, panel, that I really do welcome your feedback. And as such, whilst this looks glossy and shiny, we have only had enough printed for you. So you can look at it today. So this is not a preempt of the fact that I've already got 3,000 printed or something. We are not going to go to mass print until we've got your feedback and your comments, because it's really important to me that we absorb those and reflect them in the right way. So, panel, it's a real pleasure to be bringing you my first annual report, because, of course, last year I was reporting very much on someone else's work. But this is my work this year. I take complete responsibility. So, in summary, what you have here in the annual report includes an insight into the activities that have been carried out through my office to ensure the successful delivery of the Police and Crime Plan. The report includes an overview of the grants that have been issued, along with a range of commission services to support victims and those very much impacted by crime, and to work with perpetrators of crime to prevent offending, but really importantly, to prevent reoffending. That's really important for me. I have made significant annual savings in my first year, in fact, in my first 10 months in office, as you will be aware. And those monies are being reinvested to improve the outcomes and to ensure quicker progress is made in delivering against the Police and Crime Plan. I've attended more than 100 parish and town council meetings and many, many Neighbourhood Watch meetings. And I'd like to place on record my thanks to Neighbourhood Watch, who are volunteers of the highest standard doing what they can to make our community safer. I have carried out many surgeries, met with hundreds of people throughout my 16-17 months in office, really to drive up the engagement opportunities with communities and partners across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and to make sure that I am connecting with people about crime and criminal justice matters. In terms of some of the pledges, and this does, I guess, overlap a little bit into the Police and Crime Plan as well, but you'll see in the annual report that in terms of the police uplift, one of the biggest policing programmes that have gone on nationally for a decade, we have now, Hampshire Constabulary, exceeded our share of the Home Office National Police Uplift Programme. So you will recall that Hampshire Constabulary had to recruit 498 officers. That was done as of the beginning of this month. In fact, we're well over the 500 mark now. You will also recall, colleagues, that my own personal pledge was 600 more officers, and we are very much on course to exceed that by March, the end of March of 2023. As the lead nationally for victims, which includes violence against women and girls, and also serious and organised crime, I have continued to be a national voice in this area, shaping policy and raising awareness of both causes. In response to inflation, and of course, as you would expect somebody in my position as a corporation sole of public money, I keep a constant weekly and monthly reflect on my budget. Because of in-year underspends in the force, I've been able to put an additional £3.5 million into my estates budget, an extra £2.8 million into my vehicle fleet budget, and also to put an extra £1.5 million into my inflation budget, which you will recall in January this year, I explained to you I was setting up an inflation budget because we just didn't know what inflation was going to be, but I had guesstimated it was going to be significantly more than 4%, which is what we had forecast for. And that extra money is being drawn down to mitigate and manage, in particular, the forecast transitionary utilities and fuel inflation pressures. That's predominantly where the draw is going. I have continued to be the public voice on crime, both locally and nationally, and have responded to a number of significant public inquiries. I am ensuring that an efficient and effective police force is delivered for you as citizens of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. I continue to work with HMIC FRS. I have, through Pete and experts in my office, robust oversight and scrutiny of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight Constabulary. I directly challenge the Chief Officer Group by quarterly meetings of the COG, Chief Officer Group, and my SLT, my senior leadership team. I am delivering a compliant independent custody visitor scheme. I am ensuring that there is the strategic policing requirements that the Chief Constable must adhere to, that they are being met. I have strengthened and developed significantly partnership working. I have increased the focus on neighbourhood crimes, which is one of the key reasons why I stood for election. I didn't think there was enough focus on neighbourhood crimes. I think many of you have conveyed your agreement on that one to me. So that continued focus is something that it will carry on with gusto. I've designed and led the first county-wide Violence Against Women and Girls Task Board, which a number of good pieces of learning, cross-partnership working have come from that. I've strengthened and supported the fight against hate crime, something that is so dear to many of our hearts, particularly mine and the Chief Constable's. Through my grants and commissioning team, I have delivered more services than ever before and spent more money than ever before at just under £10 million. In terms of the detailed performance against the police and crime plan, which again is contained in the annual report, I have ensured that there is an increase in police visibility. I've invested and supported business crimes, as I said earlier, the Co-op Navigator scheme launched yesterday being just one of those. I've ensured that the force are tackling antisocial behaviour, and I have spent money on supporting the force to give them the tools they need to be able to do that with the creation of my ASB task force. I have ensured that there is a zero tolerance approach to knife crime, and we have been part of 2 national programmes, Operation Sceptre, that happens twice a year. I've commissioned services to ensure that there is a prevention of youth offending. I have invested in the growth of my youth commission and developed and trademarked my cyber ambassadors scheme, leading to the first commissioner in the country working with a multinational company in Amazon Web Services. In terms of 101, I'm working on plans, and will expand on this if you wish me to, on more customer-focused 101 service. I've led a strategic group county-wide with council leaders and CSP leads on authorised encampments. I have improved the outcomes for victims by working collaboratively with partners such as the Crown Prosecution Service. I'm delivering a robust restorative justice service across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And I hope you'll agree with me that I have been a voice for rural communities, in fact, a strong voice for rural communities, with more rural police officers working through Hampshire Constabulary than this time last year. So, Chair, I'm very pleased to present to you my annual report 2022 and welcome any comments and feedback.
Thank you, Donna. I'm sure we'll have lots and lots and lots of questions. I wonder if I could go to Margot first. I don't know, was a question or an observation, Margot?
It's an observation, Chairman. I was relieved to find that only a few copies of this had been printed, but I would question the accessibility of this print of white on colour. Mm-hmm. And I don't know whether it's proposed to be distributed in the printed format, but I think we all know that high gloss, large blocks of colour costs a fortune. Could we look at both the layout, the colour and the distribution with regard to accessibility and cost?
To respond? Yeah, thank you very much. The accessibility is the reason why we have large blocks of colour. Black on white is terrible for dyslexic and dyspraxic people. It's much easier for them to read on colour backgrounds. This is my branding. I've got a really good deal that I procured for Printworks. I'm very content with the amount of money I'm spending on it, but they will be limited. These are for you. You are the special people that have these.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Then I'm going to look for my first question, which I think is from Shirley.
Good morning, Donna.
Morning.
Actually, my question falls into 3 parts.
Okay.
And it's a stinger because it starts off with money and finance. I'd just like to, if I may, just pick up a point you made earlier about overachieving on the 600 target of additional officers. And I quote page 75 of the report that says that by 2023, you will overachieve the target of 600 by recruiting 637 officers. So in context, it sounds superb. However, drilling down a little bit with the figures, what I wanted to know is if sufficient resilience is actually being built into the policing budget to support those ongoing costs and support for the additional officers joining us.
Thank you, Chair. It's a really important question, particularly in light of the current economic climate that we're in. And the reason that my pledge is 600, so whilst it may say 637 in the report, I'm committing to 600. The reason being is that we do always have people that leave, that join, and a year in, 18 months in, decide this is just not for me, whilst they're still probationers. So by recruiting a little bit of a buffer zone, we should still be at our 600. So let's hope it stays at 637, but I'm committing to 600, just for the record. In terms of the money, yes, you're right. I mean, one of the things that I've had to do is to find the money this time last year when I became Commissioner to make sure that I could afford the 600. One of the things that's gone towards that was the fact that you all very kindly supported my pledge for the £10, which worked out at roughly 4.99% increase in the council tax last year, as opposed to only doing 1 or 1.992% or whatever. So there are extra monies that I raised through that have gone towards paying for the additional. It is the biggest cost pressure because, of course, 93% of the Hampshire Constabulary budget is spent on people, whether it be police staff, PCSOs, or on police officers. So it's a good point. Yes, we can afford them. I would love to get to 1,000 as quickly as we possibly can, but that's going to take me, unless there is another uplift Mark II nationally, that's going to take me some way. And one final point, Chair, sorry, I keep my answers as succinct as I can. Because there are other forces who are not meeting their share of the national uplift, we crudely get £50,000 for a police officer. So they will start on 24-25, but with their on-costs, pension, employers' national insurance. So crudely, you wrap it up because the 33% pension contribution to be about £50,000. For those forces that were able to over-deliver, so for every officer that we over-delivered on our 498, we were able to put a bid forward to the government to say we can do a bit more because we're an overachiever, and they've given us a bit more money. Which is £20,000. So that is also helping. So we originally put forward an offer of 60 extra or 62, and they came back and accepted, I think it was 42. I can confirm all these to you if you want me to give you the exact numbers. And that was about 3 months ago. They've come back again in the last couple of weeks to ask all forces across the country, can you go beyond what you'd previously offered? And we've said, yes, we can. And I think they've accepted another 26. So, yeah, we're sort of 60, not just under the 70 mark at the moment.
That's really good to know, actually, and I think it's a point worth maybe giving some more due circumstance and publicity to. I'm staying with finance, and that is we allowed 3.5% in the budget for police officers' pay award, which has come out at £1,900 a year.
Yep.
And what I want to know is whether or not that additional budget that we've allowed for actually covers those costs. If you could just talk us through the rudiments of it, please.
So the answer to that is no, but I can express it's a very good question. So you're quite right. The £1,900, if you average that out across the force, equates to roughly a 5% pay rise. And as you quite rightly say, we budgeted 3.5%. Some forces had only budgeted 2.5%. You may recall me talking to you about the sort of disparity nationally in that. But what happened was when the pay award was announced, I think it was end of July to start from the 1st of September for police officers through the Home Office, because they knew that police and crime commissioners couldn't afford it from in-year budgets with inflation and everything else going up, they gave us the equivalent of 2%. So the 3.5% that I put in my budget for the police pay rise plus the 2% they gave me got me to 5.5%, and it was the equivalent to 5%. So therefore I had a windfall of 0.5%, which has gone towards paying for, going back to your previous question, some of those extra officers. Does that make sense? So actually we were still okay. Phew, just.
It does make sense, and it sounds that's really great news to my ears. I'm just going to finish this one off because staying with finance, we've seen some awful examples recently of pay disputes nationally going wrong, and some of them certainly appear to be the lack of engagement with appropriate partners and trade unions and so forth, and henceforward onwards. So I wonder if you could just talk us through what you're the acting chief constable, how you've been engaging with the Police Federation and the police staff unions following the announcement, and just canter us through very quickly so that we've got an overview of and a feel for what you're achieving and what you're aspiring to do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I meet with the Police Federation every month, every 4 weeks. Actually, the Chief Constable and I, Olivia Pinckney, had a lot of contact with them in the lead up to the announcement. They were lobbying, we were sort of lobbying, I was feeding back of our money. You know, we can't afford this. If you do it unfunded, Home Office, there's going to be a significant problem here. And I'm pleased they did listen on that to the tune of 2%. So the Federation were, I mean, look, it's not for me to talk on behalf of the Federation, but we have got regular ongoing dialogue. And I think in the circumstances of the national finances, they were content, is probably as far as I would take the liberty to go with that. The Unison, who are the union that support police staff, we're actually a little bit more still up in the air on that one at the moment. So the Federation are content for the moment of where they're at. They were actually lobbying Olivia and I far harder on the South East allowance, because Surrey, Thames Valley, Sussex were all putting theirs up, and I was scratching around trying to find the money because they haven't overcommitted to more police officers like I had. So I was trying to balance the books behind the scenes, which we've got to. So that's why I announced the South East Area Allowance a couple of weeks after Thames Valley, for example, had done it, because I had to had a couple of weeks to work through, and my CFO also went to America. So, but in terms of Unison, we are in Hampshire. Thames Valley are not, but our buddy force. But we are part of the Police National Pay Joint Agreement. It's a bit like councils being part of the JNC, and so we think they are going to settle on £1,900. And every day I'm sort of checking in with the force CFO and my CFO to find out if that has now been finally agreed. But we are expecting it to be £1,900, and Unison will be content with that if that is the case. So Olivia and I have made sure we've kept constant dialogue on that one. I'm meeting with the Federation I'm on leave next week, the Tuesday after, and Unison the same week. So I'm meeting with them the week after next.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. My next question I've got is Dave.
Thank you, Chair. My question is going to be, but I want to preface it, having asked it, is have you utilised the HMIC FRS thematic report and holding the Chief Constable to account for the performance of the constabulary? Having skim-read through the HMIC FRS report, Hampshire clearly, under your watch, has a good position. I think that should be made clear. But the HMIC FRS report has what it calls its PEEL outcomes. And you said that you hold quarterly meetings with the Chief Officer Group. And I particularly note your, not say yours only, but the commitment to dwelling burglaries, which will be clearly, I think, welcomed across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. Mm-hmm. And my question really is, have these inspections identified any areas of concern? That's the HMIC FRS ones. And I've added it in here, and with the new Chief Constable about to be selected, will their commitment include reference to this? Because I think if we've had a good constabulary doing good things up to now, we're now changing Chief Officer, my thoughts are that that should form part of their expectation and performance requirement, really, because we want to maintain the high standards we managed to achieve. Does that make sense? I don't know if I put that across properly.
It does. I think it's a really good question, and I think it's, it's absolutely a crucial one as well for colleagues that don't understand the significance of the inspection regime. And so forces are inspected every 2 to 3 years, and our PEEL inspection, as you quite rightly said, has been going on. That has involved a number of thematic inspections for colleagues that aren't aware, such as the Internet Child Abuse Team, the Violent Reduction Unit, which was in my office, managed through my team. So when we have thematic inspections, as you will know, being a retired police officer, but for colleagues that don't, sometimes they come back and say, actually, you're doing a really good job. Very, very often there are learning points, and sometimes it comes back a bit like Ofsted saying, actually, you're really not very good, and you really need to significantly improve. And I don't want to be too dramatic about the VRU one, but that was kind of in that latter category, which was things need to get better. And that's why I've gripped it, redesigned it, and I know I've briefed you on that already, and I'm happy to pick up any subsequent if you want me to go over that again. So that is definitely one where I reviewed, when that was done this time last year, the VRU inspection. Obviously, I was a new commissioner, so the VRU had been set up and was running prior to my tenure. But it was an opportunity. It's probably the first big thing that I got involved in from a thematic inspection perspective, where I read the report afterwards and thought, OK, I need to get under the skin of this one quicker than perhaps I was thinking to grip the situation. That's why I've then redesigned our VRU to make it centralised rather than hub and spoke. And I hope that will be the right outcome. In terms of the more generic how I'm approaching the thematic inspections, well, the Chief Constable, the Deputy Chief Constable will brief me. Pete, and I will hand over to Pete in a minute, who can perhaps just give you a couple of lines on this as well, will then be working through that through my office on how we are making sure that the force are, for example, implementing the changes required. We then track them and we monitor their ongoing performance. So tracking, tracking, monitoring, and really making sure we're keeping a grip of that. But I have got experts behind me. Pete is also a retired police officer, for those of you that haven't met Pete before, and did work in force performance and police standards department. So that's why I employed him. So I don't know if you wanted to maybe just give a few lines on how we're sort of doing that with the thematic inspections.
Yes, certainly. So just following on from what Commissioner said there is within our office it's not a huge team, but there are dedicated staff that will work with the constabulary to look through what those recommendations may be. So there are also recommendations, but there could also be areas for improvements. So there's different classes of areas that will come back from those thematic inspections. And some of those sit within the strategic briefings that the Commissioner will get, and others of those will be ones that we just track through the office in terms of operational delivery. So sometimes that might sit around policies, procedures within the constabulary, or that may actually sit within the strategic leads of the constabulary. So, for example, the strategic lead for children and young people, for example, may take up specific areas within their work that we will be involved with in terms of kind of tracking and monitoring. So it's pulled together in terms of that oversight and scrutiny within the office arrangements.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Next question, I'm going back to Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take us back to the commitment we've already talked about earlier and welcomed wholeheartedly as a group, and I'm sure yourself, and that is about the attendance of burglaries, 100% burglaries. However, what I'd like to hear about from you, please, is to run that alongside the fabulous priorities that we have in the plan, and we all agreed were absolutely right and fitting, and also general policing. So does this fact now that we're attending 100% burglaries sit like an elephant in the room and torpedo some of the other policing priorities of the plan and day-to-day policing?
Thank you very much. Well, that's a good point, and it's actually when I was discussing this with Acting Chief Constable Ben Snuggs, that's exactly the point I asked him. You know, what is it's all very well and good making these statements, but can you reassure me that we're going to be, it's no good making it and then not sticking to it, because that'll just be a disaster. Quite frankly, you know, for me, this is business as usual. As I said at the beginning, this is exactly what every police force should be doing. The previous Home Secretary also said that in her short duration as Home Secretary, as you know, about her commitment to burglaries. And you may recall back in July, August time, I made a similar statement following on from an incident that happened in the northeast of the county. So, two things. The teams that deal with burglaries are called the Operation Hawk teams, and there is an Operation Hawk team in each of the PICs, Basingstoke, Portsmouth and Southampton. Thankfully, we don't have that many burglaries across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight each week, each month. On the Isle of Wight, they don't have a dedicated Operation Hawk team. They just have CID that will deal with that as part of. And if they need to, obviously they've got forensic capability. They're the PSIs, but they can call on if it was a real spate of burglaries. I think the investigation team on the Isle of Wight would call on Operation Hawk, probably from Southampton. So in terms of how, let's say there was a burglary now, you come home and you realise, or you wake up in the morning and you realise, which is very often what happens, it will be response and patrol that will go first. So it's the R&P teams and their capacity to be able to do that, which I think is getting to the point you were asking, is because we've now got these new officers coming through. So the new student officers, when they're out of their initial learning time and then they go off throughout supervision for the remainder of the next couple of years, they go into local policing, which is either MPT, neighbourhood policing teams, or response and patrol. So because we've now got the 500 and I think it's about 530 as of last week, that's why we're now able to make this commitment, getting back to actually what Hampshire was doing as BAU sort of pre-5-6 years ago. So in terms of the Hawk teams, yes, I mean, I do think it will make them slightly busier, but the Hawk teams would only ever have got involved when R&P go and then phone in and say, yep, there's blood on the window, you know, there is a case here to come and look at, and then scenes of crime will turn up, burglary teams turn up, and off it goes. So we haven't seen a spike in the number of burglaries. So I think the Hawk teams will be able to cope. That's what the Acting Chief Constable Ben Snuggs has told me, and the R&P response will be covered by the uplifting police officers. Does that answer it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. My question is around improved police visibility, and I really welcome your focus on neighbourhood policing. How does the OPC office intend to measure assess whether there's been any improvement in regards to police visibility?
Thank you very much. Good point, and a key part of my role. So we use lots and lots of ways that we survey the public, both through our own social media, through using YouGov to get to perhaps people that are not online that might need a telephone call. We use public libraries for surveying. In fact, we were just discussing this, Peter and I and his team, the other day around going out to consult on the council tax, for example. So there are lots and lots of different ways. We ask partners to help us with that. But the biggest way that I get feedback from victims of crime, and that's often where we can then ask them about police visibility as well, is through the Victim Care Service, which is a charity that I contract. So, yeah, and then I suppose for me, it's about talking to people like yourselves, going to parish councils, going to Neighbourhood Watch, speaking to members of Parliament, and being out and about and being visible at events and street stalls and things like that. So the public are really good at telling me if they think things are going well or not. And one of the things the force have really tried to do over the last couple of years is to make sure that every district policing team has their own social media, Facebook page to share information about arrests, missing people, suspects that they've got warrants for, etc. So yeah, I mean, they have really stepped up their social media presence in the last couple of years. But that is the online visibility. Of course, I know the public very much want the in-person, the visibility. And then beyond that, it's about my estate programme around opening new police stations and such like.
Thank you very much. Did you have another question, Leslie?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is around youth crime and diversion. How has the offending rates differed in those young people who've been received the outcome 22 as a disposal?
Well, that's a really good point, and I'm looking forward to getting the results on that myself. I can't actually answer that right now. The outcome 22, for those of you that aren't aware, I mean, does everyone know what outcome 22 is or not? No, okay. So outcome 22 is where you've got someone who is a first time or perhaps second time but lower level offender. And rather than criminalising particularly teenagers, the police can use what's called an outcome 22, which is where if the young person agrees to almost like a contract of going to some restorative justice, whatever, it's that sort of thing. So I actually use Restorative Justice Solutions, a charity who support a lot of the work on outcome 22. So Hampshire Constabulary officers will refer there. There are a couple of other charities as well, but they're doing the bulk of the work for me here. And we started this programme in November or December. I think it was November last year. It was November, yeah. So it normally takes between sort of 12 months to sort of 36 months to sort of really be able to map the trends on that one. Initial feedback, gut feeling from officers is that it is helping. I can't give you the exact right now, but I'm happy to bring that back to a subsequent meeting because it hasn't been long enough yet for the programme to be running.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to ask if we can follow that up. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm sure Caroline has noted that. Thank you, Leslie. Going to Dave again.
Thank you, Chair. How do you seek to ensure that the Youth Commission members are representative of the diverse communities across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight?
With targeted recruitment, and actually it's not easy, actually, if I'm honest with you. So we tend to get a good spread of ages and geography, but getting different sort of cultural backgrounds, religions, race, etc., it's more tricky. And as it happens, the Youth Commission recruitment started in September, so it's going on right now. So I've got an update not next week, so I'm off the week after, with the Youth Commission manager. I have sort of a catch up with her once a quarter on various things. But yeah, so they do really reach out, often by using existing members to promote and to stimulate applications. What we do have, which is, I think, really encouraging, particularly as it's something I want the force to move into, is looking at how they manage and work with both victims and perpetrators of crime that are classified as autistic or have any kind of additional sort of neurological, because the way that both perpetrators of crime and victims process information they're given is something I've had quite a lot of casework from parents of victims of crime to say, you wouldn't have realised that my daughter was autistic, the police wouldn't when they came into the home, because she presents as, as if she doesn't have autism, but actually her vulnerability is very significant, and that was in quite a nasty DA case. So it is something the force are looking at, and actually what I do have in my Youth Commission is a really good spread there to be able to feed into the force on how things should be done better in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder if I could go to Sarah now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Commissioner. I'd like to know that since being the Commissioner, what improvements have you put in place to the 101 service, please?
Lovely to see you back, by the way. Right, this has been my policy, pledge, issue. There is currently a gold group that's been set up for the 101 service. It is struggling, and it's struggling twofold. 20% because of some IT issues, 80% because we have got lots of vacancies in contact management at the moment. And you'll probably recall me saying to you previously that contact management operates between Southampton Central Police Station, you know, the PIC, which is where most of the 999 and 101s are actually answered. And then what you've got in Netley is the overflow of the answering of the calls, but actually the deployers. So if I'm in Southampton and I say, hello, Hampshire, how can I help you? And then you tell me there's something going on in your road, in your house, whatever, someone's listening from Netley and they then are talking to the police officers while I'm talking to you, they are deploying to say, right, you know, car 406, you need to go to Shirley High Street, and off they go. So what's happened is that with COVID, there were a number of people that came to work in contact management who'd previously worked in airports, in the cruise industry, etc. Because, of course, it's very Southampton-centric, this part of the business, part of the organisation. And now that we're out of COVID and airlines are flying again and cruise ships are sailing, we artificially lost a number of staff. So about 4 or 5 weeks ago, I have, working with the force, asked them to put together a recruitment program. So we are now going to be using recruitment consultants to make sure that we're getting people who are appropriate, who can touch type to the speed the force wants and everything else. We have actually got 100 CVs that have come in, so we're getting there. But once they're whittled down, we may get 20 or 5 or 30 that they may want to interview from that. They're the numbers they've sort of preempted me on at the moment. Simon Dodds, who is the superintendent, who was formerly the district commander for Southampton, has now moved over to contact management. He's leading that gold group. I'd be very happy to bring that back and perhaps keep that one on the agenda, Chair, at your behest for future meetings, because, you know, in terms of the call waiting time, sometimes they're fantastic and we're meeting the sort of 3.5 minutes, which is where we want to be, and other times it can be in excess of an hour. The service we're giving is getting better, and alongside the resourcing issue and the IT glitches we've had, there is another piece of work, which is that, and I met with the head of IT on Monday this week, that is where the system should be able to automatically automate giving updates if your car was stolen. You know, when the officer in the case updates, it should trigger an automatic text, email, however you've preferred to get your update. Also, I'm in the process of setting up a new victims hub. That will take a lot of the sort of 40,000 calls that go into contact management every year on the 101. 15,000 of those are what I would refer to, and you guys would know, as service failure. So they are people phoning up to say, I still haven't had an update in my case, what's going on? And that's then putting the system under more pressure. So what I want to do is to give those victims of crime a better, more specific channel to be able to get their updates, and my victim care contract, which is my biggest single contract, which is £850,000, is up for renewal next March. So I'm looking at extending it for a couple of months to give me the headroom to work with the force, which we've got a victim care board set up, a victims hub board set up, which is being led by my head of criminal justice and commissioning. We've worked with ACC, Rob France, head of crime, this week. We've met with him, and we're working through how we can get the victims hub set up to divert those calls into a much more victim-focused update team rather than hanging on the phone on 101 for ages. But that will also then help what I want to have more time to deal with what they need to deal with. That makes sense.
Thank you. That is really informative and so much information that I wanted. Thank you so much. And with your victims coming back for an update, with your IT system, with that text and update, you'll probably find that 15,000 is only then maybe 3,000. So fingers crossed, it's all going to work. But thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, certainly, because I know 101 and response times to that are really a high focus of ours. Tony?
Yeah, we've talked about this a long time, I think long before your time, obviously. Should we not be looking at something different, localised? You talk about Southampton, picking phone calls, computerised systems and feedback. If it was more localised, when I mean localised in smaller areas, not necessarily each town, but maybe 2 towns, would it not be better, and then people get a better response? Because I'll be honest, and it may have changed since I phoned it last, that you phone 101 and the person you're talking to on the end don't really know where you're talking about. So surely we should be looking at something different. It's been around a long time. The idea was sound when it came out. It's overloaded. Should you not be, instead of saying 101, let's look at a different system? Because if I'm honest, I come from north of Hampshire, and everything's spread, in my view, might be biased, all down the bottom. And which is Southampton, Portsmouth, big areas. They've got to have a priority, but we also want it up the north, which is Basingstoke, Rushmore, and places like that. Should we not be looking at something different? Because if I'm really honest with you, you're fiddling. I don't mean it disrespects them. In my view, I don't think it will work.
I'm a huge fan, Tony, of decentralisation, and I also think in policing, and you know, there are experts in the room here, much more than me, that the geographical policing operating model, you will know. I mean, I don't want to put Pete on the spot, but you know, a number of police officers who've been around a long time will agree that you can't beat that geographical policing model, and to a lesser extent, that's basically what you've got on the island. As a district commander that's got a flex of their own patch over there, you don't have that in the rest of Hampshire, as we know, because things have been much more centralised. But without giving away any trade secrets, it's certainly one of my red line conversations I've been having with the prospective new chief constables. So I get what you're saying. I agree, decentralisation, personalising it, getting as close, getting those that are going to do the doing as close to those that have the problem is always a good thing in any industry, whatever you're doing. Unfortunately, it's also the most expensive way of doing everything. But, yes, I get the point you're making. And I think that there are some bridges that can come over the next couple of years, subject to money, inflation and finances, that I would like to bring back to you in due course.
Thank you very much. I'm sure it will come as no surprise because it is something we spend a lot of time talking about. And I think for us, there's probably something that, again, you've just described how the system works, and I'm not sure everybody will understand that, but I'm sure we can have a conversation about how we bring everybody up to speed, how that works as far as how it's handled, and what actions are being put in place as an update. So I'm sure we'll come to that.
Sorry, Chair, do you remember I did say to you previously about coming on a visit to the court? Yeah, right. That's been delayed because they were supposed to be refurbing the Vickery call centre building 6 months ago. It's actually in train now, which is why I've had to delay that for you. But as soon as I can get you, Netley really is the best place, because otherwise, if you go to Southampton, it feels like an office effectively. But at Netley, you see the firearms team, you see the tactical deployers. You really get a feel for what they do from the call coming in to the other team deploying and speaking to the officers. As I'm typing what's going on the street, you're talking to them to say, right, you've got an IC1, he's got this is his previous, there's a firearm registered to that address. It's so much better. So I need to get you in there, but at the moment the carpets are up, the floors are up, the cabling, the ducting's being refinished. So as soon as that building is up again and operational, they're all the staff are back in. I'll get you guys there if that's okay.
Could you include in that the wider Netley training and development? I've got a bit of a biased interest in it, but I think there's been a lot of good work, and I'm sure the staff that are there who have had to manage the enormous increase in training of all these officers would probably appreciate us actually getting a true feel for that, because I think we covered the point earlier about the numbers, and you highlighted the numbers you're up to. But I think for people to appreciate, particularly this panel to appreciate just what's involved in putting an officer through that process and getting them out on the street would be very, very valuable if you can fit that in.
Perhaps we could do some bleep testing as well, Mr. Stewart. You could do some of that if you like.
How many members are aware of what that is? Oh, it's a shame, because I was going to duck it.
But Carolyn, would you mind making a log and is that okay? And then I can get that stuff in train. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And my next questioner is Stuart.
Thank you. Good morning, Donna.
Morning.
One of the priorities that you have is cracking down on unauthorised encampments. Mm-hmm. And your report helpfully covers some of the achievements during the year, which is really helpful. Have you got any evidence, hard facts, as to how often or the number of cases where the police have actually used their new powers?
Off the top of my head, from my own memory, 4 times since it came in June, May, June, whenever it was. I think it was June. So they have used their because effectively it's the old section 21 powers that had to be met. All it means now is that you can get to section 21 threshold. So it's about the significant section 16. Sorry, 61. Oh, not 16 or 21. It's 61. Sorry, section 61 powers. This is why having an ex-cop sat next to me is very helpful. So the difference is, so you know it has to be a significant impact, that has remained, but to get to the significant level now, you now don't have to have 12 vehicles or more, you only have to have 6, and rather than before you could only ban from the site for return for 6 months, you can now ban for 12 months. If that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, there was a case in Porchester particularly that I can remember, and I'm sure that you'll probably recall as well, Narinda, that was quite tumultuous throughout August time, I think it was. And actually the section 61 threshold was met there because, whereas previously it wouldn't have been because there were fewer vehicles, but it came within the legislation. I think they then moved on to Gosport next to, might be Bridge Murray School, the same encampment, unauthorised encampment, and it was used again there as well. That's 2. From memory, I think there's been a 3rd one in Southampton. Actually, there was one in Portsmouth as well. They're the ones I can remember. I mean, I'm very happy to get the actual stats on that. But it still doesn't go far enough. The legislation is actually not that helpful at all. And as I think I covered with the panel previously, and I certainly covered with the strategic group I set up with the council leaders and CSP chairs and some of the solicitors, that the pledge that was made through the Police Crime Sentencing Courts Bill that unauthorised encampments will be able to be moved on within 24 hours has not materialised because in the legislation the word significant still remains. So for the police, they've still got to do their significant assessment. The fact there's fewer vehicles, yeah, that's slightly helpful, but that's really the only benefit to that new piece of legislation. And through the meeting that I set up, as you will have seen in the report, so I won't go over it again, I think really the next step now is for that use of Article 4 injunction for certain patches if councils are able to do that through the High Court, which I'm really happy to support them in any way I can, but really it's for councils to lead that as the landowners.
That's really helpful in the context of that, because certainly from my part of the world, which is obviously in Hart, top part of Hampshire, we have over the summer had a spate of encampments, and an initial reluctance from the police to get engaged, and it needed me to get on the phone and to put some pressure on that.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't need to use the powers, but it was their response time to come out to take a view, and once they came out and had a polite word, people moved on.
Have you met your new district commander yet?
No.
Okay, so her name is Emma Hart,
yes,
and she covers Hart.
Yeah.
But anyway, I caught up with her last week at the strategic headquarters. It would be really great for you to, if that's your portfolio or if that's you've got a ward where you've got particular susceptibility, I can connect you to her if you drop me an email. But
really helpful,
you know, it'll be really good for you as the Hart councillors to get to know her better. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you very much. I've now also, Stuart, very helpfully come up with a new phrase, so I'm going to go for another councillor from the top part of Hampshire, Morris.
Some of us would say it was the best part of Hampshire, but there you go. Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Donna. Can I say, as a husband, but also a father of 2 young girls, how delighted I am to see the emphasis that you have been giving towards initiatives on violence against women and girls, both locally and on the national stage as well. And I'm particularly pleased to read in the report the work and the emphasis has been given on a cultural change across the whole criminal justice system to improve trust and confidence in the system. So whilst you are seeking to encourage victims, particularly women and girls, to report incidents of sexual offences, how are you working with the CPS to increase successful prosecution rates, which I think many of us would regard as a major point of failure within the whole system?
That's a really good point. Thank you so much for asking that. There is an awful lot going on. So I meet with the Director of Crown Prosecution for Wessex area every other month. The force are meeting with her monthly. There is it's a board that reviews different charges, so a kind of working group between Hampshire Constabulary and the CPS, but particularly for RASO, rape and serious sexual assault cases, and things that are of a domestic abuse nature. And what the CPS have now done is they've got dedicated here, this is not across the whole country, but we have got this here, because we were part of a CPS pilot that ran from 2020 to 2021 around charging and online charging advice, particularly for RASO. They have got dedicated CPS lawyers, advocates who are trained in this area. So there are case reviews, there are online systems that are just for those particular crime types as opposed to all crime types to speed them up through the process. There are service level agreements between the CPS and Hampshire Constabulary around how long they have to wait to get a charging decision. Quite often they'll come back with an action plan, so the CPS lawyer will review the file and then come back and say, right, you just need to sign that page, add a bit more there, statement from so-and-so needs a bit of, can you make sure that that's covered off fully, the video, whatever, body worn, whatever, and then once the action's taken, reloaded up to the system, and then the CPS then will, issue that charging decision. That is 24 hours a day. In terms of our rape and serious sexual assault and VORG type charging, we are doing really, really well. We've had a tremendous improvement in those charge rates in this area. And in fact, we are marginally now behind the national average. We were way below it. We are marginally behind the national average. So actually things have improved quite significantly in that area. But again, if that is something you're particularly interested in, I can actually send you the stats. So if you want to give me any sort of heads up on these sort of things in advance, or after the meeting like this, I can then, if you want that, get that sent to you. It's encouraging.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether anybody had a follow-up question. Matt, did you have a follow-up question on that one?
Not so much a follow-up on that, but something else regarding the CPS, I think, and youth offending, if that's okay. Yeah, so we're beginning to see a lot of issues in Southampton, and I know this is the same across the region, particularly coming from our youth, being raised with me from our youth offending team.
Yeah.
We are seeing a real delay in sentencing for youth first-time offenders. This is becoming really concerning to us as a city. It's hampering our ability to, I think, to engage with those people adequately and early enough to either redirect or for that sentencing to take place. And that includes restorative justice and outcome 22, like we were talking about earlier. And also is sort of giving a bit of a message that these individuals, in many cases, are going 18 months, and by the time they're seeing court have committed several offences on top of that. I just wonder if we could get a commitment from you today to put pressure on the investigations of those youth first-time offenders, the CPS and the judiciary to speed that up.
Certainly. I'm not aware of the particular issue. I'm not disputing it. I'm sure that is the case, as you've stated it. What I would like to do, if you don't mind, is would you be able to send me an email with that? And then perhaps I can arrange for myself and our Youth Justice Lead in the force, along with my Force Liaison Officer, Roger Trencher, DCI, who's at the back of the room, and your CSP manager. Perhaps we can work together on that, or your yacht manager, whoever you want to bring to the meeting, because I'd like to really get under the skin of some specifics, so that, because with the CPS you quite often need to be able to say, here are the examples, and that would be really, really helpful. And then I promise you, through the local criminal justice board, that's the perfect forum for me to do that.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Maurice, did you have another question?
I do, thank you, Chairman. £677,000 was spent on traffic enforcement issues along the A32 earlier this year. So can I ask, have you considered whether addressing the excessive noise and speeding on the A32 and A272 may have moved the problem behaviour to other parts of the county's road network? And if so, how are you intending to address this?
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. The cameras are not in yet, and in fact, I had some casework the other day chasing me up on, because they were supposed to be going in September, October time. One of the traffic inspectors has chased it up, and the county council have come back with a large bill from SSE, so that's not helpful. That was not costed into the plan, so I'm currently going to be having negotiations about that. So at the moment, there's no disruption because of the cameras, because they're not in. But it is a really good point, and I did talk to the traffic team about this. One of the issues with that particular junction, and the perfect nature for those that like to ride motorbikes incredibly fast, is the way the roads slant down, so it gives them a bit more extra speed. It's more fun to ride on. They are, smooth roads. There's not speed bumps and traffic lights, and you've got a nice terrain to ride motorbikes fast on. But it's obviously that cafe. Which is the crossroads, which is attracting. Now, actually, a lot of the people that are causing the problems with the very loud exhaust and not driving in accordance with the law, so speeding, are we get lots of people that come here from outside of Hampshire. So one of the strategies of putting those cameras in to slow the traffic down is to make it less attractive for them to come to Hampshire to do that, and to actually, sounds awful, doesn't it, but they go to other counties and do that, which, you know, that's the way of the world, unfortunately, and I don't like to say that, but that's what it is. So we know that lots of people that are coming here are coming from surrounding counties. So by making that road less fun for them to drive on and break the law, I'm hoping that won't push them into other parts of Hampshire, but it will push them to other counties. And that's certainly what the traffic cops have spoken to me about.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could just follow up on that one. I mean, surprisingly, A32 actually generated some correspondence to me from residents of Aldershot as well. So there has been a great deal of interest in this. So can I ask what further initiatives you would take to expand traffic enforcement across some other areas of Hampshire, especially in urban and residential areas?
Yeah. Well, I mean, ultimately, I don't think it's the job of the police to have to be putting in speed cameras on public highway where there is speeding. If someone is speeding, yes, it's a criminal offence, but actually ensuring that the roads are safe and are engineered in such a way is, of course, a Highways Authority issue. Now, unfortunately, no fault of any council, any Highways Authority or the police, the legislation around the speed cameras was such that the councils who were buying the equipment, calibrating them regularly, which has an engineering cost, and paying for the electricity to operate the cameras were the one people in the whole chain of events through the Treasury, policing and councils. Those that were bearing the cost were receiving none of the income. So when someone got an 80 quid ticket for speeding on the A272, all the money went to the Treasury, and then 49% of it came back to the police force, and the councils got nothing. And that's why, during austerity, councils went, well, we're turning off our speed cameras then, which is why so many across the country have been turned off. Now, I have been talking to a couple of colleagues, and the Home Office are alive to some of these issues. They've been working with the DFT on different types of cameras, those that monitor both the vibration and the speed, the noise type trial cameras. We did volunteer Hampshire to be a pilot area to the DFT through the Home Office for one of those. Our colleagues in Surrey and Sussex are doing the same as well for the other side of the A272. But ultimately, I think, the solutions, the long-term solutions here lay with councils making a decision about their land, me supporting that, perhaps with some of the maintenance ongoing costs, because it also is a benefit to police to have people driving in accordance with the law, obviously, and having less road accidents. Prevention is obviously better than cure, but it does need a solution that is outside of us here in Hampshire. It's obviously something for the Treasury and the Home Office predominantly, probably a little bit with DLUC to discuss. But certainly there is no disruption at the moment because, as I say, those cameras, come back to your original question, are not there. I do think the longer term solution is definitely me working, for example, with the Highways Authority. So whilst I agreed to fund those 6 cameras, obviously I had to do that in conjunction with Hampshire County Council. I'm paying for them, but the county have said, yes, it's okay to put them on their strategic road network, on their Highways Authority, and they're going to pick up the ongoing electricity cost of that, because the main cost was, of course, the outlay of the equipment in the first place. But it's not an ideal solution. And if there are, I cannot tell you the amount of casework that I had before I was even elected on about those 2 roads. But of course, if there are other roads like that, then we need to get partners together. If it's in your patch, County Council, you as councillors, so the county as the Highways Authority, and look at what needs to be done.
Lovely, thank you very much. If I could go to Narinda, please.
Hi, Donna.
Hi.
How do you monitor the performance of commission projects and services to ensure that they are providing value for money and meeting the agreed objectives? And part 2 of my question is there's been phenomenal improvement in the way that the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner engage with CSPs in assessing and selecting successful grant bids. Can you just assure the panel that this will continue and what process will go through to achieve that?
Thank you very much for the question and for the positive feedback. That's really good to know, because actually I don't take anything for granted, so having that affirmation is really good. So in terms of the first part of the question, which was around how do I monitor the performance of commission services. So each of the commission, all the money that we give out falls into crudely 4 different commissioning managers, and then we have the VRU that's separate as well. So we've got a DA lead, for example, and someone who leads on sexual crime, someone who leads on perpetrators, so that restorative justice type contracts, and the commissioning manager, it's their job to make sure that they are getting their quarterly returns. So, for example, let's go for Stop Domestic Abuse, somebody that covers your area. So we've got 2 main charities across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight that deliver domestic abuse services, Yellow Door in Southampton, to Stop Domestic Abuse, and actually on the island you've got Community First as well. Though they get their payments in quarterly payments in arrears, and they have to fill out a quarterly return to us based on how many people they've seen, whether they went to a stage 1 appointment, a stage 2 appointment, depending on how the contract and the SLA has been set up. They have to tell us what the outcomes were. So if it's a charity working with perpetrator-led focus, they'd have to tell us what the reoffending rate has been that they're aware of. They can work with the police to get that data as well for an individual. And because there are data sharing agreements between my office, the charities and the force, so that we all triangulate that information. We also get information around the ethnic make-up of people that they're helping, whether they're male, female, binary, non-binary, whether they, how old they are, if they've got other vulnerabilities or disabilities. So we can then monitor through my office, who is it we're helping? Where do we think there is a growth in demand that we might need to commission more services in that area? Is it geographical, or is it a type of society, proportion of society? And if they don't give us those quarterly returns to tell us what their performance matrix and numbers are, that people are actually helping, they don't get their next quarterly payment. So that's very much done by my commissioning managers. We have actually had a contract that was not great in my time, only one. Everything else, as far as, the commissioners have not raised anything with me, so I assume that they're okay. But there was one where we had a bit of a service failure. And actually, the charity themselves notified us and said, it was financial, they were really struggling financially. They then brought another charity in to take over that work. We got involved, we made sure that we were able to alter the contract and do what needed to be done. So it does happen occasionally. But yeah, there is ongoing performance management, and the commissioning managers are out meeting the charities, going on visits with them, doing things all the time as well, and I pop up here and there.
Brilliant, thank you very much, Donna. If I could go to Dave, please.
Still recovering from bleep testing.
I'm so going to make sure that happens.
Your report, presentation and communication, I sort of summarised my question. If you turn to page 33.
Which one is that, Dave? Because mine don't have numbers on.
That's my point.
Okay. Made beautifully.
Might be worth considering.
Yeah.
On a more serious point on this is about how we intend to publish. This is your first report. You own it, as you said.
Yeah.
And I think there's some tremendous stuff in here. And I've put 33, were that the right number, talks about all the safer community funding you've done. And I think it's very visual and it's good. So how do you intend to raise the awareness of the report with residents and partner organisations across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, I was just trying to think.
So you've got a good report.
Yeah.
Comprehensive once it's tidied up, as somebody mentioned, and paginated.
Yeah.
But how are you going to raise awareness? Because so many of these reports
go
into a hole, don't they, somewhere, and nobody actually gets to read it. And actually, we want them to read it because this is a good story in that sense.
Yes.
And I just wonder, and I'm probably dating myself now. I like nice hard copies that I can sit and read and visualise. Other people like social media outlets. I'm just wondering what the OPCC plan is for communication of this.
Yeah, so Marisa Charles is here. She is my head of comms, sat over there at the back of the room, and she has devised a comms strategy for me. I'm away next week on leave, so I have delegated to Marisa, who will be working with Deputy PCC to get this out, subject to your comments and feedback. So numbering of pages is certainly one, which Marisa can do. And in terms of, taking on point Councillor Power's point earlier, we don't want to be printing bucket loads of these for them to sit in boxes in our office. You know how it works in councils as well. And then it is a complete waste of public money. So the comms plan is much, as I say, Marisa is the expert here, but we will be putting it on our website. Of course, in terms of making it really accessible. Pete, can you just tell us about the accessibility stuff you mentioned to me this morning about this with a plan?
Yeah, so it's quite straightforward. So there'll be a copy that is accessibility friendly on the website, and maybe even some arrangements for those contacting the office for any particular needs that they may have.
Yeah, and there is software now, obviously, for people who are, for example, blind, where you can click on something and it then reads it to you, as I'm sure you're aware. But certainly about putting this on our website, putting it on our social media. All copies will be sent to all councils, CSP chairs, council leaders and cabinet members. Marissa's got a whole list of people who, and that will be an electronic link sent for that once it's hosted on our website. But of course, those that do want hard copies, we may end up sending one version to each council, so they can have it in their reception areas, and perhaps to each of the MPs. I think that's in Marissa's plan. But actually keeping these to really the printing of them, you know, to a low key. And actually the online digital version, as you know from my police and crime plan, this is why we've used the grey and, you know, we've used the kind of colour blocks, because it fits in with that, so that it makes it easier, because we did some research on how people read things online, how it makes it easier if you are really partially sighted, but you can see some things. We haven't got videos embedded in this one, as we had with the police and crime plan, but that's because this is an annual report and that one was designed to span 3 years. So that will be viewed much more than perhaps this one.
So I'll just come back briefly on that then, and I'm sure Karen will probably have a view about how the Isle of Wight Council would respond and who the best person to go to is. I'm putting a local parish council hat on. I'm sure colleagues around here, once I got permission, would take that to my local meeting and say, you need to see this is really good. And if you want to see it, I'd then point them to the website where they can, so that we don't waste money printing, but they can actually, but there's nothing better than actually saying to somebody, this is out, this is the document, we're mentioned in here, go on the website, blah, 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 and then those people will go home and they'll probably do that because they've had the trigger and you're using the local parish council link, if you like, through the members to do that. So it's things like that, I think.
Yeah.
Pointing people to it,
Pointing people to it, yeah.
You know what
I'll
I mean?
do it on my own social media as well as the AP. But also the Force will publicise this for me. Things like the Rural Crime newsletter, we'll put the hyperlink in that one that goes out digitally. The Force will have it on their intranet. And also things like parish council and town council meetings. You know, these are the sorts of things that I will take with me to those kind of meetings as well, as I do with the police and crime plan. So we have had several boxes of those. So I have been getting those out. But then that is a 3-year document, so it's very different.
Yeah, I mean, Karen, I don't know if you got your thoughts on the Isle of Wight Council, because I'm not so close as you are.
I'll have a think about that and get back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Brilliant. I know Sarah wanted to come in on this point.
Thank you, Chair. Are you going to do them as QR codes so that people can just scan the QR code, like on a poster in the front of the police station windows and things?
Absolutely, yes. And in fact, what we've now got on our backdrops, on our, if you're on Teams, for example, if you're on a meeting with me, we've got the QR code to the police and crime plan. So that's absolutely something. We do use QR codes quite a lot. We've got it on some of our roller banners and things for like public events and, you know, county fair type things. So yeah, absolutely. And that's a good call, Sarah. It's easy for particularly young people. They love that.
One additional point I just wanted to make, if we went to the financial performance page, something that we've been very focused on historically as a panel has just been about what's the Constabulary's line of budgeting and reporting and what's been the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner's budget. And I think I'm a little concerned because it misrepresents the facts, I think, on the 40.43 million as far as cost of the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner at 11.7%. One of my concerns is because it's made such a big deal about spending 88.3% on Hampshire Constabulary. Now, I know on the following page, you break down expenditure owned by the PCC, and I know what you're trying to do as far as give people information, but there's something for me about adding some particular clarity to what is, I think the question you're trying to answer is, how much does the office cost?
Yeah.
And if that's 2.8 million, that's less than 1% rather than 11.7%, because you choose to commission services or have estates in your side of the line rather than constabulary. And I just think some people will make the wrong assessment of how much the office is costing.
So what you think then, have the OPCC office cost, estates, and then police, and make the estates as kind of a budget line all separately?
Just be really clear. For me, I'd just be really clear about the way I would read the 88.3% is how much is the office costing.
Good point.
And if I made that comparison nationally,
Yeah.
it's much more likely to be 1%, 2%, 3%.
than 11%.
rather than what you choose to have in your office.
It's a really good point, actually. I think we need to take that forward.
Shirley.
Sorry, and not to overkill on that, but absolutely agree with the Chair. I thought it was a splendid document. The only question I had out of all of this was the overrepresentation of that nearly 12% that looks for the Hampshire Police and Crime Commissioner. And you've really, I think, got to nail that. Because to me, as well as a member of the public, it doesn't look like you're providing good value for money.
Service,
because it's 12%, that massive budget. And actually, it's not. It's a tiny morsel amount. And I really think you're missing a trick on that one.
Yeah.
So just to reiterate that, thank you, Chair.
I'm really happy now that we will get that box and we'll go through all of the financial pages. We'll separate it down to police force, OPCC, and then estates as a separate third line, so that it does make it much clearer, because then you do get, if you're a member of the public and you wanted to do a comparison with Sussex, Surrey, Thames Valley, Dorset, what my OPCC cost is versus theirs. I will 100% do that. That's really good feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. I can't see any other questions for that item. So based upon those discussions, if I could make the recommendation that a response from the panel is prepared by Caroline as a Democratic Services Officer, which will be circulated to all members for visibility and comment before being sent to the Commissioner. Therefore, the recommendations which I will be seeking agreement for are outlined in the updated covering report published as a supplementary paper, that the panel receives the draft annual report of the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hampshire, that delegated authority be given to the Democratic Service Officer to the panel in consultation with the Chairman of the panel to submit a report to the Commissioner setting out the panel's review of and recommendations on the draft annual report in line with section 28, open brackets 4, close brackets, of the Police Reform and Social Responsibility Act. Can I have the panel's agreement to do that? Brilliant, thank you very much. Moving on to item 10 then, the Police and Crime Commissioner's Police and Crime Plan Performance and Delivery Update. For our pages, that's pages 71 to 80. Donna, over to you to give us an update.
Thank you very much. Well, on this one, I'm going to hand over to Pete Jones to take us through the slides, if that's okay.
Brilliant.
Thank you. So the annual report, I guess, has somewhat stolen the thunder, maybe, of the next three areas. But as has been previously agreed, this is an update on three areas, panel, around more police officers, better outcomes for victims, and also tackling antisocial behaviour. So, Chair, I was going to suggest that there's just 6 slides, which I appreciate the panel have seen before, so I was going to go through all 6 slides and then pause after that for questions, if that's okay. So in relation to the next 6 slides, I'm just going to, I appreciate the panel have seen these slides already, so I'm going to talk around some of the narrative that perhaps sits behind these. Conscious that some of the policy and performance working group members are in the room and have already had quite an in-depth presentation of the antisocial behaviour area, which I'll come to last. But I think in terms of what the Commissioner's already updated on, and particularly in relation to sort of trying to reinvest and quicken that progress that is made in delivering the police and crime plan, and particularly for those members that are new and not familiar with my role, is that one of my main roles within the OPCC is to track and monitor the delivery of the police and crime plan through the implementation plan for the Police and Crime Commissioner. So these next slides and the narrative that sits behind it, of course, you'll understand just often skims along the surface of the detailed work that goes beneath all of these areas. And in line with that, I'm going to just leave those first 2 points on the slide there for the next slide, because they do fit in with some of the questions that have been raised already. And of course, you know, the title of this says 600 more police officers, but it's much more than just 600 more police officers, because in terms of visibility, making them these officers more accessible to the communities, your communities, and our communities, is that it's what those officers do and how through some of the work of the OPCC we can try and make sure that the constabulary makes best use of those officers in terms of what they do and where they go, and also making sure that their time is freed up. So that's why in the police and crime plan, and you'll see it in the other slides as well, that there is more to the plan than just the headline. So you would have seen already in the annual report there around the commissioning of those preventative support programs to reduce crime. One example that's been discussed already is around sort of tackling ASB and those sort of total grant fundings that go into that, and that's in another slide in a moment when we get to ASB. But that's also looking at those additional preventative commission services. And what I found in my work as well is that quite often some of the services that are commissioned, so Safer Streets is a good example in Southampton, for example, is that they are often commissioned to tackle one area, but actually a benefit is that they also contribute to another. And I think we discussed that on the Policy and Performance Working Group as well. In terms of monitoring the use of out-of-court disposal, then Deputy Police Crime Commissioner chairs monthly scrutiny panel meetings. They review 10 cases to actually talk through the details of those cases. So that's where some of the oversight scrutiny of the office comes into this, in terms of actually looking at those individual details, working through what the actual elements of the crime were, the circumstances for that out-of-court disposal, and tracking it all the way through to actually sort of look at that and say, do we think that was the right outcome, and feeding that back through to the constabulary. In terms of volunteering groups, particularly those around Neighbourhood Watch, Community Speed Watch, Special Constables and the Constabulary within Hampshire and Isle of Wight, there is specific examples that I've again seen through my work of casework that's come through the office, where one example I could think of recently was Neighbourhood Watch coordinator contacted the Commissioner and said, look, I've got an idea about how we might be able to share more information. I'm keen to get that out into our community. I'm keen to connect my role as Neighbourhood Watch coordinator with the local police. Can you help me do that? So there's specific examples of that, as well as lots of other contact that the Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner have with things like bar meets in the rural areas and that sort of more proactive outreach. So just in relation to those 2 points on the previous slide there, just covering 600 more police officers, it's been discussed quite extensively already, but this is not just about those more police officers, as I said. There's been other areas that have been improved that the Commissioner has spoken about before in relation to re-establishing that dedicated Isle of Wight roads policing. And as you've already heard, we've delivered that government target by this year, and hoping to exceed that by the end of March in 2023. And I think that is a question that has been asked previously, certainly through the office, around where are these officers going. So that connection with the question maybe asked about burglary, for example, and about how that's going to be serviced. Then 100% of those new officers are going out to local policing and local response teams. And the Home Secretary wrote recently and was talking about antisocial behaviour, community crime, that emphasis on neighbourhood crimes, and certainly that around burglary, getting those right police officers in the right place, so that we've had reassurance that those officers are going to those kind of frontline roles, and certainly linking to the question around visibility will help hopefully improve that. Moving on then to improving or better outcomes for victims. So the Commissioner is a joint national lead for victims and VOG, violence against women and girls, and certainly sits right at the centre of that portfolio, together with the national policing lead, who is Deputy Chief Constable Maggie Blythe. And some of you will remember that Maggie Blythe was or is a Hampshire officer, so there's a real close connection there in terms of the Commissioner's leading that, and a real key part of, as we discussed already, around improving those victims' outcomes for victims of crime. And I think that support is evidenced for all victims. So not just VORG, but domestic abuse, sexual crime, modern slavery, which again was mentioned in the Commissioner's update, stalking and harassment. And you'll see on the slide there, already mentioned and certainly extensively set out in the annexes of the annual report, the grants and the commissioning and the areas that benefit from that. There is various strands of activity that go through all of that work. So domestic abuse contracts, the Safer Streets funding, Youth Commission, Cyber Ambassadors, again mentioned by the Commissioner in her update, Violent Reduction Unit, and also the grant funding and the Safe for Me. And in terms of working with partners, particularly into schools and colleges, then again, this is another area that the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner I know is quite passionate about and certainly becomes involved with schools and colleges in terms of that area. And finally on here, again covered in the annual report, around the restorative solutions to deliver those victim-initiated restorative justice service into to the residents of Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So appreciate panel, you've seen these slides already. There's just some data on the right-hand side there highlighting victim satisfaction. There is, as you can see, if you take the right-hand column there for overall rating and kept informed, and the other column of overall rating and kept informed there, you'll see a direct correlation between those that are kept informed and those that are satisfied with the service that they get. Appreciate that that's probably not a surprise to the panel, not a surprise to read, because actually you feel more satisfied if somebody's explaining from a policing perspective what's going on and how your case is progressing, and less so, of course, if you don't. And what we've also found through some of the research together with the constabulary is that there's a direct correlation between particularly victims of domestic violence and being kept better informed and being more satisfied about the police response.
Just ask a question on that one. So with the introduction of the commitment to attending all dwelling burglaries, would it be possible to kind of take an assessment of where we are now and then look at this one 12 months down the line when that initiative has had a chance to bed in? Because I imagine just on that one topic area, one would like to think the response from the public would go up because they're actually getting officers into the house. I just think it's a good, tangible proof of performance.
I think it's, as members be aware, I think sometimes you've got to be careful about making a direct correlation between figures. And this is obviously in relation to being kept informed, so I wouldn't know, nor does anyone, I guess, about how their satisfaction at how police dealt with their burglary may, of course, go up. Victim satisfaction is something that is tracked very closely by the constabulary and certainly through the Commissioner's office. I guess it will go back to a little bit around the outcome 22 question, where I suppose there needs to be some time going by to see whether this is impacted. But I think the being kept informed bit, I think it is a really interesting one. It's an obvious one, but I think it probably is something that you can say is a direct correlation between victim satisfaction and being kept informed, I would suggest.
Yep. And in terms of volume crimes, to affect the stats, in terms of burglaries, it would reflect less than 1% of the crime types in Hampshire. You know, we're at 80-odd thousand crimes now already, so by the end of the year we're going to be at, you know, probably 90-odd thousand crimes, I would have thought, maybe 88.
And finally, the presentation is around tackling ASB, as I said earlier. This has been through the Policy Performance Working Group. Sorry. Starting again, as I said earlier, this has been through the Policy and Performance Working Group around tackling ASB. The reason that these are coloured and the others are not is because when we discussed these at the working group, it was a way of actually sort of demonstrating how we were tracking these. So all of these objectives within the Police and Crime Plan are tracked. It wasn't my intention to go through this any further, Chair, if that's okay, apart from to say that again, that third item down there, the 16 projects that receive investment to tackle ASB across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, covered in the annual report and are quite extensive. The only thing that I would add is that there is currently taking place a series of community trigger training that the Commissioner has funded to help improve awareness around community trigger and ensure that those statutory partners fulfil their duties in dealing with antisocial behaviour. And my final slide there just reflects some of the good news stories that we've had as a result of particularly the ASB task force chaired by the Commissioner in really getting down to those local issues through those community safety partnerships, the police, local authorities that want to raise issues, particularly through the summer, around what those local issues are and how the Commissioner can help those through funding or coordination of those partners. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Pete. Let's go to questions. I think the first question I've got is from Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Appreciate some of the work that's gone into that. When you were looking at the demographics of the new officers that you're recruiting into Hampshire Constabulary, I think it's on one of the slides, it says 90% were white British. Have you been able to identify areas where the force is not properly represented? I think you may have alluded to some of that earlier. You know, in those general demographics, and what sort of actions do you intend to do to maybe improve that if that's necessary?
Yes, thank you very much. We're broadly meeting our target. The Home Office ask for regular updates through their National Police Uplift Board, and that comes under the Policing Minister's portfolio, which is currently Jeremy Quinn. And yeah, so our demographic here is, I think, 89% represent ethnic minority groups in Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, and so we're at 90%, so we are 1% adrift effectively, but there or thereabouts. It really has been a massive focus for our Chief Constable, Olivia Pinkney. In fact, she's led a lot of the work that the National Police Chiefs Council have done in this area. It is still a real challenge. And, you know, we have done really well in Asian police officer recruitment, but actually where we're still really struggling is in black police officer recruitment. And so the National Police Chiefs Council are considering this. There are, you know, advertising campaigns, come in and meet the force type days, there's certain things, but it really is, you know, it really is an issue. But for us, if you then went into the detail of the makeup of our 11% ethnic minority in Hampshire, I think broadly we are not out of kilter with those that are coming through and joining the force in terms of the spread.
Okay, so we just heard earlier from the public question, I think they said there were 3,022 officers, 9 black and 3 Asian. I mean, that's doesn't seem particularly
what did they say? So I was outside getting a cup for some water. What did they say, sorry?
3,022 officers. There were 9 black and 3 Asian officers currently in the force. That was what we... 22.
Okay, I mean, I think it's probably best, rather than me guesstimating what I think it is that I can come back to you and give you that information if you want it. Certainly we have far more Asian police officers than we do black police officers, but we definitely do have black police officers working in the northeast of the county, in rural, on roads. And I was with them at the Black Asian Ethnic Minority Conference last week. And that was, you know, lots of organisations were there. Yeah, so I'm happy to give you the actual specific breakdown. I mean, it changes month by month because, of course, people retire or join and start, but I can give you the up-to-date as of...
Well, one more, Matthew, because I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah, and just lastly, do you as the Police and Crime Commissioner feel that it's the responsibility of police police and crime commissioners to show inclusion and diversity and to represent the constabulary in order to enable that recruitment and confidence in the police force.
100%. Absolutely, unequivocally. It is my duty, and I actually really enjoy doing it as well. We've got some excellent officers. Been talking to them. I mean, one of our brilliant, fantastic officers, who I was working with on something a couple of weeks ago, was telling me that the reason he joined was because his father had worked as a civil servant for the Home Office, and that's what got him interested in being a police officer. So if we can use other government agencies to stoke their kids growing up and think about policing, it really is a priority for me. It is not an easy task. There are certain parts of the county where it's more of a challenge than others, and the Isle of Wight, for example, because of course you've got to look at the demographics of the Isle of Wight, so it really is a challenge. But having particularly, I would say, taking Hampshire and the Isle of Wight out of this for the moment and just looking across the whole of the country, British policing needs more black police officers, because there is definitely, there are documented issues, and the Race Action Plan covers this, in the trust and confidence in many black communities in the country towards the police. So the only way to break that down is to have more black police officers saying, I am a member of your community and I'm a police officer. And so leading by example, I don't think you can beat it. So yeah, very much, and I know that the Chief Constable, I can speak to her on this one, completely agrees with that.
Brilliant, thank you, Leslie.
Thank you, Chair. Ensure all victims are given the opportunity to benefit from restorative justice.
Yeah.
It's really good to say 100% of victims in the RJ process were satisfied with the service. And most important for me, 86% of offenders didn't reoffend after the RJ process. Brilliant. So 278 people have accessed the RJ process, the victims, 21-22. You've had 261,000 or over 261,000 reported crimes in the year. Hopefully you share my concern that actually it's a fantastic resource, but only 278 out of 261,000 have accessed it. Can I just ask if you're aware what steps are being taken to increase the uptake, and if there's any barriers that have been identified? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, we are actually, believe it or not, one of the forces who are using restorative justice the most, which is great because there are national league tables on this as well. I am significantly improving and boosting the restorative justice contract. So the current one we have expires in March. So we have just been doing the work with the force now on how to get more police officers referring. We're looking at more crime types that could be referred into the restorative justice process. Some of that's led by the victims themselves. Some victims of burglary would rather sit down and talk to somebody about what they've done to their home. One of the success rates you've just referenced there, who has stopped now committing crime, is a burglar who was a Class A drug addict in and out of prison, who said, I was just so immature and so selfish, and I never once, in any of the time I've been offending, I've done multiple community orders, I've been to prison 3 times. He was in his early 30s, and he said, when I met the old couple whose house I burgled, and they were shaking when they met me, and the lady was in tears, elderly lady was in tears, and how they said that they've got an ottoman they put up against their bedroom door every night now, and they've got this religious thing they do every evening of checking every door, locking it, window locks, and he said, I've absolutely terrorised them, I've changed their whole lives, and they will never sleep soundly like they ever did before. And he said, I never once looked at it through the perspective of a victim, of them, of the people whose house I was burgling, and I probably burgled 20 plus houses. I mean, that is a real success story, because that was what triggered him to change his offending, and that's because even though he'd had a prison sentence, they had chosen as victims to take up the offer of having restorative justice and working through the stages of kind of trauma that you work through when you've been a victim of that kind of crime. And whilst he was in prison, they wrote to him and asked him if they could meet with him. And when he came out, he said yes. And when he came out of prison, he met with them. And that's what then triggered him to stop offending. It wasn't the prison sentence. So there really is a place for it. What I've got to be careful on behalf of all of you is that it's not overused as a means to get people out of the criminal justice system when CID are busy and, you know, there's backlogs and we don't want the charging rates to go down so low because, but there is absolutely a place in society for restorative justice. It doesn't always end in the individuals meeting each other. Sometimes it can just be victims writing a letter, they mentally offload after they've worked through with that with a practitioner, and that helps them to deal with their trauma. But it is important, and we've just been working with the force on how to build the spec for the new tender, and that is going out now, imminently, and the new contract will be awarded from the beginning of April.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Maurice.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just want to pick up, following on the question from Matthew there. I mean, the one headline that screamed out to me from that was the 90% white British recruits. We really do need to do something to adjust that so that our police force reflects the communities that they are serving. I just wonder whether, rather than just sort of Hampshire-wide campaigns and the national campaigns, we've actually considered localised campaigns as well. I say that representing Rushmore, where 15% of our population is from the Nepalese community, and there are certainly plenty of ex-Gurkhas who are working in the security industry locally, who I'm sure would make prime candidates for the police force. So I just wonder whether we could look at initiatives like that to attract recruits.
Well, actually, that's a really, really interesting point, actually. And the reason I think we've not seen such an uptake with the Nepalese community, particularly those who are ex-Gurkhas, who've served Queen and Country for for so many years, it's because of the police degree. And actually, there's, the armed forces, retired armed forces personnel have got so many overlapping skill sets. It really is fortuitous for us having a huge army base and a huge naval base here in Hampshire. I have been talking to the armed forces, and the force have got this as well. Chief Superintendent Dave Powell is our force lead for working with the armed forces. He and I have been to a couple of events at Worthy Down, talking to one of the commandants there about this. I am hoping, I've been lobbying for some movement on the police degree, because I think if you've been in the armed forces for a number of years and worked your way up, and you've got this brilliant skill set, you could have worked in military intelligence, you could be brilliant for CID, to be a detective. But the thought of coming in and taking a degree, perhaps if you're in your early to mid-40s and this is going to be your second career, it's just not really where you want to be. So I've been lobbying for forces to be able to offer a choice to people when they come in through the front door. So, if you are someone who's just graduated and you're in that studying mode and you want to apply for fast track, or, you want to be an academic within policing, to be solutionising and looking at trends in crime and that sort of thing, then, perhaps doing the degree entry is the right one for you. But if you're not, and you prefer the 16-week training and then perhaps go and work in CID, and they do still have to take exams to become a detective. There are quite a lot of exams they have to take to get their national accreditation, but it's in a different sort of environment. So I'm not saying get rid of the police degree, I would love there to be a choice at the front door, and also to be able to tailor a package for those coming out of the armed forces, so that there is a much easier application process for them. And I think that we would see a big uptake then in the Nepalese community coming to us, and they are some of the discussions that are,
Brilliant, thank you very much. I've then got a question from Stuart.
Thank you, Chairman. Just want to go back to the slide that was on there around better outcomes for victims. That's the one, yeah. So am I right in thinking that there's some disparity between some of the numbers here than what's in this sort of annual report?
So again, sorry, is there some disparity between?
There's some slight disparity between at least one of the numbers on there than numbers in here. And
right.
I'm assuming that's probably because it's a different reporting period, because this talks about a period from April 21 through to September 20, and this is year to date.
That's right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I'd worked that one out, but one of the interesting figures that's available here is the overall satisfaction for victims at 52%. And I couldn't find in the main report what the overall satisfaction for victims. It talks about the domestic abuse satisfaction levels. So I was just in terms of trends and which way things are going. It may well be in the pack and I've not seen it, but if you haven't got that available,
you mean the 22 figure? So you mean the 2022 figure, satisfaction of victims being 52.1%?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not really changed. I think it's changed by 0.1% from 2021.
Fine. So that's similar.
Yeah.
Okay, so my follow-on, having understood the numbers better, and thank you for that, is that what seems from the information that you provided, what seems to make the difference is the victim feeling that they're being kept informed. And that seems to be, the conclusion is that seems to be working for domestic abuse victims. But what action is being taken to improve the overall number by making sure that victims who are not subject to domestic abuse are also being kept better informed?
It's absolutely stark, as you say. I mean, if only we could have, is it 89%, I was looking a minute ago, of those that are satisfied with, that are within the domestic abuse setting. And it's simply because of the sheer volume of support they have wrapped around them. So they have, first of all, therapeutic counselling that I pay for that they can access. They have an IDVA, an independent domestic violence advocate, who is there to hold their hand through what happens when you're giving your statement, what happens now, what happens when the forensics have come back, what happens when the charge happens, what the restraining order means, all the way through, right up until the day of the trial, and giving evidence and everything. And then often what the sentence means if somebody is going to be coming out of prison on licence for X, Y and Z. So they get given a whole load of wraparound support, as do victims of sexual violence, so it's domestic and sexual. There isn't that level of support for many other victims of crime. Let's take, for example, somebody who has been a victim of attempted murder. Really, really, really awful crime. You've almost died, or a really nasty, grievous bodily harm. There will potentially be a family liaison officer that will be allocated to you and your family to support you, particularly through giving evidence and things like that. But actually, the same level of support, let's say it was a fight in a pub, is often not there. Now, the force do have what's called a victim care team. There are 35 people that work in the force victim care team, and they support victims of crime after the charge has been made, but not before, which is why we're getting so many of those calls going into 101 to say what's going on with my case, because until the charge has been made, they're kind of hanging around in ether waiting for the officer in the case to update them as and when there's a material change. This is why I've been working on setting up a victims hub, because there are, of the 43 police forces in England and Wales, there are variations of victims hubs in 12 forces. Some sit in the OPCC office, some sit in the force, some are actually contracted out wholly and entirely to a charity. And working with Kate Gunson, who is my head of criminal justice and commissioning, they did a fantastic piece of landscaping work, and we had an afternoon where on Teams we had 4 or 5 different parts of the country come online and tell us how they do it, different forces and or OPCC offices. And there is a really good version in the West Midlands and a really good version in Avon and Somerset. We are going with a version of the West Mids one with a few permeations, but effectively I want to spend some of the money that I'm spending at the moment on my victim care contract in a new victims hub, hosted within the force itself, so that if you're sat there as someone who's working, answering calls, answering emails, you're sat alongside people, you'll all have access to RMS, the record management system, which is where investigators will put on their updates on still waiting for digital forensics to come back, still waiting for blood sampling to come back, whatever, or I've called victim today, went around an updated statement. That's the system that they use. So to be able to update victims, you need to have access to RMS. That's absolutely key. So by having a unit where they work together, having IDVAs in there, ISFAs, the Independent Sexual Violence Advocates, CHISFAs, child trained in sexual violence, called Frankie workers that I commission for children who've been victims of sexual violence. Under the new victim code of compliance that's coming in, that I have to adhere to as a commissioner, I also have a responsibility under the new victims code to make sure that criminal justice and policing are also adhering to that code. So for me, having this victims hub is going to give a much better service to victims of crime. So in answer to your question, I'm not saying we're ever going to get to the absolute wraparound that you get if you're a victim of domestic or sexual abuse. However, if you have had your car stolen or you've been burgled, like the old couple I mentioned earlier, that unit should be will be so much better equipped to support you, both emotionally through diverting you to therapeutic counselling, or explaining the criminal justice process to you if you're waiting for the burglary case to go to court, to go to trial or sentencing. It will be much better, and I hope that we will see a significant uptake in victim satisfaction as a consequence.
Okay, that's really interesting. It'd be good. I don't know what the timescale is for that, because I mean, clearly the implications of the figures are, if you were to strip out the domestic abuse and sexual violence satisfaction scores, and it's reassuring to see that extra support is given for those particular crimes. But it means that for everybody else, a majority of people are dissatisfied I would imagine.
Well,
because if it's 52% with everybody, it's going to be below 50%.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that for you.
Yeah.
I'll maybe come back to you and give you the exact.
Yeah.
I mean, we have got some of them on here, haven't we, with the overall ratings, but like you say, it's whether or not the DA numbers are in that as well, and if you take that out, what would that then do? It's a really good point. I do think things are going to get significantly better. As I say, we had our first big meeting on Monday of this week with the force to go through our presentation to them of this is the exploratory work we've done around a victims hub, and this is kind of the model that we are looking at. How would that work with you with their 35 police staff they've already got sat in those teams? It is overseen by a Chief Superintendent, Liam Davis, who works to one of our Assistant Chief Constables who is the head of crime, so it sits within the crime area. So now the force need to just get their head around what we're proposing, how that's going to work with them, how they will share information, how do they feel about the fact that the calls would go into that unit for updates pre-charge, because at the moment those 35 are only dealing with post-charge victim care. But that's why I'm saying, well, I know that's going to be an uptake in your work, which is why I'm going to put money and people into it from this previous contract that I'd commissioned. And it may be that Victim Care Service, who are a charity, they may well win it again. Who knows? They've got to go through a procurement exercise. But whoever wins that will be, having staff sitting alongside and working directly with Hampshire Constabulary and your Yellow Doors and your Stop Domestic Abuse and all of those IDVAs and ISVAs who work specially trained across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. So I really hope it will improve things.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's the end of our questions now, Commissioner. So it's really for us to accept the recommendation that the update on the performance delivery plan has been given and noted by us as a panel. We all agreed. And I just really wanted to thank you so much, Donna, because you know what? I don't think anybody in this room or who understands how you operate can be anything other than impressed by how you can answer in so much detail and so much breadth in what is a vastly increased role as a commissioner, that you're absolutely on it, you know what's going on, and actually you can give us so much confidence that you are on it and you do know what's going on, and a true sense that victims are at the heart of what you do. So thank you very, very much for coming to us today and sharing all of those bits of information with us in updates.
It means a lot.
Thank you. So, panel, we have item 11 in front of us, which is the Police and Crime Panel Working Group arrangements, which are available on pages 81 and 84. Thank you, Commissioner. Members are presented with a report from the Democratic Services Officer to the panel, proposing arrangements for a precept, task and finish group as agreed at our last meeting. The report is also recommends appointment to the vacant position on the Policy and Performance Working Group. I'm not sure if anybody has any comments or questions about the report that Caroline can answer. Do you have any questions, comments? No? Brilliant. Ahead of today's meeting, we have, of course, sought interest in membership of the Task and Finish Group and the vacancy on the Policy and Performance Working Group. And the following members have put their names forwards. So for the one vacancy on the Policy and Performance Working Group, Councillor Karen Lucioni has put her name forward, and I will. I'm so worried about getting it right. I'm bound to get it wrong. That's the key. Yeah. For the 5 vacancies on the Precept, Task and Finish group, I've got Karen, Sarah, Shirley, and Martin, and I have 1 vacancy. I don't know anybody at this stage wants to put them forward. We can take it as 4 rather than 5 if we haven't got a volunteer. Nope. So we'll take it as 4. So the proposed recommendation is, and I don't know, Caroline, whether you want to read it out as far as the recommendation.
So the proposed recommendations are that the panel agrees the introduction of the Precept, Task and Finish group for 23-24 in accordance with the terms of reference set out in Appendix 1 of the report. That the panel agree the membership of the Precept, Task and Finish group, and as the Chairman just announced, that will be Councillor Karen Lucioni, Councillor Sarah Vaughan, Councillor Martin Pepper, and Shirley Young, Independent Co-opted Member. And further, that the panel agree appointment of Councillor Karen Lucioni to the vacancy on the Policy and Performance Working Group for the 22-23 municipal year. Thank you.
Are we all agreed? Agreed. Lovely, thank you very much. Moving on to item 12 then, for our work programme on pages 85 and 94. The future work programme for the panel for this municipal year is outlined on those pages. Do members have any questions or comments on our work programme? No, none. So can we take that as agreed work programme for us as a panel? Brilliant. Thank you very much. That then brings our meeting to an end. I wonder if I could ask for the webcast to be ended. Can I just check the webcast has been finished?